What's up, sons? It's Blind Rod with Son of a Tech once again, and today I have my new test bench reveal. I finally built another one to start testing some more games more thoroughly for the channel, kind of going back to the roots of the channel, as well as being able to hopefully also test some of the cryptocurrency miners, some of the new ones that are coming out, because that's kind of moving really quickly. And I just wanted to have something that I could move in real quick and move out real fast. But then the video kind of turned into an i3 8350K overclocking video as well, so we're going to go over some of my discoveries with that too here. But without further ado, let's hop into it. Alright, so to start things off, let's talk about the parts in the build itself. We're rocking the Cooler Master XB Evo. If you guys have never seen this case before, it is pretty much the most versatile case that I've seen on the market as of date, or to date, I would say. It is basically a cube. It has handles, which is super helpful. The top comes off with just 2 screws, and you can drop in GPUs in and out really easy. It has a removable motherboard tray, and the power supply actually removes out from the back side, so you can then screw it into a bracket and slide it back in. So everything is really easy to swap in and out, including the hard drives, because it has a hot swap bays on the front. Now they are 3.5-inch hot swap bays, but nonetheless it's super helpful if you're just trying to pop in some drives real quick for data, archive storage, and so on. It is definitely the most recommended part out of all of the parts that are in this test bench build. Next we have the ASRock Z370 Killer SLI. ASRock sent this over, and I have a review of it up here in the corner if you want to go check it out. It's a pretty badass board and gets all the things done that you could want a motherboard to get done. It does have USB-C front header ports, so if you have a newer case that supports USB-C on the front, then you are going to be able to do that with this motherboard. It also has the M.2 slots and so on and so forth. Pretty standard. Check out the review if you're interested in that more. Next is the i3 8350K from Intel. It's a quad-core processor that is overclockable as long as you have a Z-rated motherboard, so keep that in mind. And we are going to go over the overclocking here in just a second. I am actually pretty impressed with this little processor, but I would say that it's pretty much still an i5 7600K or an i5 6600K. There's nothing super special here other than you're going to be able to get it at a cheaper price point. So to cool it, we actually have the Arctic Freezer 33 cooler, and I think it's a little lackluster for the amount of heat the processor puts out, and we're probably going to have to upgrade it. I do want to stay air with the test bench so we can swap things in and out, and I think we'll probably go with the Noctua or like a cryo rig, something along those lines, even maybe the Be Quiets, something that's going to get us a little bit better cooling potential. We'll talk about why once we get to the overclocking, but it's getting the job done, but not as well as it should. We are pairing this with 16 gigabytes of Corsair Dominator Platinum clocked at 3200 megahertz, and there's, like I said, 16 gigabytes of it, and it's running in dual channel, so this setup wouldn't support quad channel anyways, so we're going to be perfect as far as all that goes. Nice high clocks. Now the CAS latency, I can't remember, I believe it was 16. It's a little high. It's not like the super awesome low 14 that you see in like the G-Skill Flare X that I also have a kit of, but I save that usually for the Ryzen testing. Now for storage, we just have an M.2 over SATA. It does keep the space low, so we don't have to have an SSD hanging out in there anywhere, and we can just throw the OS on that. And it's only about 256 gigabytes, and like I said, over SATA, so it's not super fast, but for the purpose that we're using it for, the type of testing we're doing, we don't need necessarily super fast storage, so we'll save that for our Threadripper build over there. Finally, powering it all is the Corsair CX750M. It's a semi-modular power supply. It is 80 plus bronze rated, so it's going to deliver all the power that we need to, probably even all the way up to if we decide to test any sort of SLI or Crossfire configurations, as long as we're not doing more than 2 cards. However, we probably or primarily will be just testing 1 card at a time in this particular system. So moving on to the fun part, overclocking the i3 8350K. The reason we want to do this is we want to basically have the highest core clock performance that we can get for the high frame rate games. So if we're looking at testing for something like Counter-Strike or Quake Champions and so on and so forth, we need to make sure that we have a high core clock to go along with the GPU and try not to bottleneck it. Now, in some cases, like I mentioned, Quake Champions, which does utilize multiple threads a little bit better, we might actually have to bump to a different system that has more threads. Whether that needs to happen or doesn't need to happen, we'll have to determine once we get into further testing, of course. But for the majority of titles, 4 cores at a high core clock is going to be pretty much what we're looking for. Starting things off, just to let you guys know, this processor has been delidded. You can check out the video for how to delid it or delidding it up here in the corner. It didn't give us much in the way of like temperatures or decrease in temperatures, unfortunately, but I think that's primarily due to the Arctic freezer cooler and not so much the delid process, the more testing that I've done with it. Now, we did get it to 5 gigahertz at 1.45 volts, and we got it to about 4.8 gigahertz at 1.35 volts. Now, taking a look at those scores popping up into Cinebench, we see that we got at stock with 2133 megahertz on the memory, so we hadn't applied the XMP profile yet. We had a score of 650 in Cinebench R15. That's actually pretty good, because if you're looking at Ryzen 3, you're looking at more around 600 points, and actually even lower than that at 2133, you're probably looking more in the 550s, so on. So while these processors aren't necessarily in the same price range, the 8350K is significantly more expensive than a Ryzen 3 1300X. It is just notable because they're both quad cores, so don't start shouting at me yet. I'm very aware of that. Moving on though, if we did put the memory up to 3200 megahertz, we didn't see a huge boost, but we did see some, and we got a 671 in Cinebench R15. And then once we started overclocking, things got a lot more interesting. At 5 gigahertz, we got a score of 807, which is pretty incredible. However, on this cooler, we started hitting 100 degrees C, and that started to cause some thermal throttling, but not so much, because we still did get a higher score than when we got rid of the thermal throttling. To get rid of that, we decided for right now sticking to 4.8 gigahertz at 1.35 volts, which kept us under ADC on IDA 64 for 14 hours. And with that, the Cinebench score was 775. Moving on from there, we will talk about Geekbench. We did test Geekbench, and at stock, the single thread performance was 5,148, while the multi-thread performance was 15,473. And once again, you see a huge improvement with overclocking here. Going to 5 gigahertz, we've got a single thread score of 6,425 and a multi-thread score of almost 20,000 at 19,455. Pretty impressive results there. If you're going to be picking up, you know, the 8350K, overclocking is something you're definitely going to want to do. I did try multi-core enhancement, and the highest the cores would all clock to is 4 gigahertz. And so just a note there, you're going to have to manually overclock it to get these numbers. Moving on to TimeSpy Physics, because this is primarily going to be for testing games. So this is DirectX 12 Physics. We had a stock score of 3,919 with a 5 gigahertz score of 4,973. Finally, we did take a look at the age-old Firestrike Directx 11. At stock, it had a score of 8,817, and at 5 gigahertz, it had a score of 11,116. So definitely a little bit more optimized, I think, there for the DirectX 11. Also, that is a lower resolution, so I think that does tell us a little bit about what we're going to be able to see with the test bench and where we're headed there. I'd be curious what you guys are getting on your 8350Ks. If you have one, let me know in the comment section below. Let me know, should I upgrade the processor if I'm going to be doing test bench work, like testing different games and as they release. I think as long as we pull up the GPU and CPU usage and monitor that to make sure the CPU isn't bottlenecking the GPU, we're going to be fine. And then I'll just make notations or asterisks next to the ones where, let's say, the CPU usage is pegged at 100% and the GPU usage is anything below 100%. So that would be how you would tell it's essentially bottlenecking it. Now, for all the tests I've done so far for the RX 580 that we have in here, which is from Sapphire, the special edition, which we'll be getting a review video out here shortly. We haven't encountered that scenario with any of the games we've tested so far. The closest one that we came to having an issue was Quake Champions, but there's also some other oddities that are going on with that game, so we might leave that out of the benchmarks. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe down below, and I'll see you next Tuesday.